Hey guys. Tonight, the fog rolls in from the Thames like a slow exhale, carrying the faint smell of coal, rain, and regret. You stand beneath a flickering gas lamp on a London street that feels both proud and tired. The stones beneath your feet are slick with drizzle, and the glow of empire, the mighty British Empire, flickers like that lamp, still burning but trembling. Somewhere, a carriage wheel splashes through a puddle. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. A man in a top hat rushes past, clutching a newspaper. The headline boasts of dominion, of trade routes spanning the globe, of progress forged in steam and blood. But you can see it in his eyes, the same exhaustion that lingers in the air. The empire isn't dying yet, but it's catching its breath. Every empire does, just before the fall. Tonight, we'll travel through the halls of London's power and the silence of its colonies. We'll hear the clink of teacups and the cry of rebellion, the triumphs, the vanity, and the one fatal mistake that began to unravel it all. So, settle in. Let the fog close around you and listen. The empire's heartbeat still echoes. It just doesn't know it's slowing down. London at night hums like a restless machine. The rain taps steadily against rooftops, slipping through alleys that smell of soot, wet wool, and tea leaves. You walk along the Thames, watching lantern light ripple across the dark water. Ships creak against the docks, their masts rising like blackened spears into the mist. Somewhere, a whistle blows, sharp and lonely. The air tastes metallic, industry distilled into weather. You notice how everything seems alive: gears, pulleys, wheels, people. The empire breathes through motion, even the fog moves with purpose, as if obeying orders from Parliament. Coal dust coats the air so thickly you could almost chew it. In the 19th century, this was the price of power: smog as perfume, progress as pollution. The world was being built in real time, one chimney at a time. The streets glisten under gaslight. Horses clatter over cobblestones, dragging carriages that gleam like obsidian beetles. Gentlemen stride quickly, collars high, faces half hidden. Every corner hides both opportunity and disease. You can hear laughter from a tavern, loud, fleeting, desperate. London's poor drink to forget their hunger, London's rich drink to celebrate ignoring it. Balance, in its own way. A street vendor calls out, selling roasted chestnuts. The smell cuts through the damp. Sweet, smoky, human. You watch him hand a bag to a boy in rags who pays with 2 copper coins and too much gratitude. Tiny exchanges like that kept the empire's heart beating, survival disguised as commerce. Every empire thrives on small hungers before collapsing under big ones. You pass the docks again, where sailors unload crates stamped with faraway names: Bombay, Calcutta, Singapore. Each box smells different: spices, silk, decay. The air itself feels imported. The British Empire was never just land. It was scent, sound, and taste colonized into identity. Tea in porcelain cups, sugar in everything sweet, and guilt in every silence. Along the waterfront, a policeman patrols, boots echoing in a steady rhythm. Order must be seen, even when chaos hides behind polished doors. The British believed structure could prevent decay. Yet every rigid system eventually forgets how to bend. You can almost hear the wood creaking already. Up the hill, the clock tower glows faintly through the fog. Big Ben doesn't tell time, it enforces it. Trains, factories, colonies, all synchronized to its heartbeat. You realize control here was as much about minutes as miles. To rule the world, they first ruled the clock. A genius move and a curse that would never end ticking. The rain eases, but the mist thickens. The city becomes soft, blurred, dreamlike. Windows flicker with yellow warmth, little sanctuaries from the endless drizzle. You imagine the countless stories unfolding inside, letters written, deals struck, secrets whispered over tea. History doesn't just happen in battlefields, it brews quietly in drawing rooms. You stop at a corner to rest. The stone beneath your hand feels damp and ancient. This same wall probably heard the footsteps of Dickens, Disraeli, and countless nameless souls who built the empire from beneath. The grandeur above ground rested entirely on exhaustion below it. London was a cathedral built on human hours. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls. It's soft, slow, almost apologetic. You feel a strange ache in that sound, the melancholy of something too large to sustain itself. Empires, like people, rarely notice when they start to die. It's never a fall, it's a long exhale. You take a final look at the river. Its surface catches a faint shimmer of light, like liquid history reflecting the city's pulse. You can almost hear it whispering in the rhythm of the current. This is how power sounds when it breathes, and like all living things, it will one day run out of breath. The morning fog lifts slowly, revealing a London waking to its ritual. The smell of coal fades into the sharper scent of brewed tea. Across every home, from palace to slum, cups clink softly, tiny echoes of empire. You sit by a window and watch steam rise from your own cup, curling upward like a question. Few things built the British world like tea. It wasn't just a drink, it was a quiet declaration of control. You taste it, bitter and warm. The leaves came from India, the sugar from the Caribbean, the porcelain from China. Every sip is a geography lesson in domination. What feels like comfort began in violence. Trade ships, tariffs, revolts. The empire sold civility in a cup, but the water always hid the cost. It's strange how sweetness often smells like debt. Factories whistle to life beyond the window. You hear the rhythm of engines, metal grinding, steam hissing, ambition roaring awake. The world was addicted to industry now. Britain wasn't just drinking tea, it was brewing modernity. Steel rails, textile looms, ship hulls, every invention another artery in the empire's growing body. But big bodies collapse under their own weight eventually. You walk outside and see the morning crowd. Top hats and aprons, side by side. The air smells of iron, soot, and toast. Even hunger has a schedule here. Men hurry to factories. Women balance baskets of bread. Children dart between carriages like ghosts. The empire's prosperity runs on precision and exhaustion. Progress disguised as discipline. On a nearby street, a woman sells tea from a cart, her hands red from cold. The steam rises like incense. Dock workers stop to buy a sip of warmth before another day of lifting someone else's fortune. You notice the irony. Empire promised comfort but produced fatigue. Even caffeine can't wake a world running on fumes. Posters hang on brick walls, ads for new colonies, new routes, new opportunities. The sun never sets on the British Empire, they say. You look up at the sky, it's grey, dull, sunless. The slogan sounds more like a threat than pride. Eternal light is overrated when you're never allowed to rest. A train whistle pierces the morning. The sound is powerful, metallic, final. Trains symbolized everything Britain believed about itself. Speed, order, progress. Yet the same rails that carried wealth out of colonies would later carry soldiers home from wars that cracked the illusion of invincibility. Iron, it turns out, rusts just like anything else. You pass a cafe window where men in uniforms talk quietly over newspapers. The headlines boast of exports and victories, but their eyes don't match the words. There's a weariness there, the kind that comes when success no longer satisfies. You realize that the empire's greatest danger wasn't rebellion, it was apathy. Inside, the cafe smells of smoke and bread. A clock ticks loudly, and every second sounds rehearsed. The empire trained even time to behave. You imagine the colonies hearing that tick in distant echoes, London time imposed across oceans, as if the sun itself reported to Westminster. Control so complete it became invisible. You take another sip of tea. It's gone lukewarm. The taste has dulled, but the habit remains. That's how decline begins, not in sudden disaster, but in rituals losing their flavor. The British Empire would keep drinking long after the warmth was gone. You look out again, and the fog has returned, swallowing the city whole. The tea, the trains, the progress, it all dissolves back into grey. You realize the fatal mistake may not have been greed or war, but forgetting how to see through the fog they created. And once you can't see, you can't lead. The afternoon light filters weakly through a veil of soot. London glows sepia, the colour of old parchment and forgotten promises. You walk through Bloomsbury, where brick houses wear black stains from decades of coal breath. Curtains flutter in warm drawing rooms, hiding secrets behind civility. Inside, the empire relaxes, or tries to. The world might be conquered, but dinner must still begin at 7. Even dominion needs manners. A servant opens the door to one of those homes, ushering you into air thick with perfume and pipe smoke. The furniture gleams darkly, mahogany imported from forests that no longer exist. The scent of beeswax polish and roasted pheasant mingles with laughter, gentle and rehearsed. The British upper class mastered the art of appearing unbothered, while history trembled outside their windows. You notice how everything here feels heavy, the curtains, the silverware, even the conversation. A woman comments on India's exotic charm between sips of sherry. A man brags about shipping routes as though he personally invented longitude. The fireplace crackles softly, sounding almost embarrassed. Wealth, it turns out, always needs an audience. A servant passes quietly, hands folded behind his back. You realize he moves like smoke, present, necessary, unseen. The British domestic world ran on silence. From colonies abroad to parlours at home, the machine of empire depended on people who knew not to speak too loudly. Power here meant never having to raise your voice. Dinner begins. The table shines with candles, mirrors, and pride. Dishes arrive in waves: roast duck, boiled potatoes, puddings soaked in syrup. You can smell sugar thick in the air. Every bite is colonial. Even dessert carries the weight of plantations and ports. The sweetness feels polite, but underneath it, something ferments. Guilt has a flavour. It's subtle, but it lingers. A man makes a toast to civilization. Glasses clink, laughter blooms. You notice how quickly the word civilization erases the people who built it. The empire's greatest invention wasn't the steam engine, it was justification, the belief that power was charity, that expansion was enlightenment. That theft was destiny wrapped in velvet. Outside, the city exhales smoke. Chimneys release grey prayers into the night. The smell seeps into everything. Curtains, clothes, lungs. Londoners called it progress. Their doctors called it fog. Their poets called it truth. And yet, they kept burning. No empire ever quits while it's still warm. Later, when the guests leave, the house falls into a silence so deep it feels fragile. Candles sputter, dishes clatter in the kitchen below. Upstairs, the hosts murmur softly, already bored of conquest. You realize boredom is the luxury of those insulated from consequence. Empires die not from rebellion, but from ennui. The rain returns, pattering gently against glass. Somewhere in the distance, a carriage wheel squeals. The city hums on. The servants extinguish the fire, their faces orange for a brief moment before the darkness swallows them again. Every evening ended this way, warmth withdrawing politely into shadow. You step outside. The night smells of damp stone and faint sweetness. A curtain flickers shut above you. The house disappears into quiet dignity, but dignity can't hold forever. You feel the wind shift, colder, restless. Something in the empire's rhythm is starting to falter. You walk away, your footsteps echoing in the narrow street. Behind you, the house sighs, a sound only you seem to hear. History always groans a little before it cracks. And in that tiny sound, you feel the future tugging gently at the seams of the past. The next morning, the fog sits lower, thicker, heavier, like it's thinking. You make your way toward the docks, where the empire's veins meet the sea. The air tastes of salt and tar. Ropes creak, gulls scream, waves slap against wooden hulls that smell of fish, sweat, and faraway rain. Dock workers move like ghosts through mist, voices muffled by the rhythm of labor. Here, Britain's pulse beats loudest and fastest. Ships rise out of the fog like dark cathedrals. Masts tower into the grey sky, rigging tangled like veins of industry. Each vessel carries not just goods, but stories. Tea, cotton, gunpowder, hope, despair. The dockhands don't read the manifests. They don't need to. The scent of cargo tells them enough. The empire's wealth always had a smell, sweet, foreign, faintly spoiled. You watch a crane lift a crate, stamped Calcutta. The wood is soaked through from rain, the letters bleeding slightly. A man shouts orders. Another coughs into his sleeve. You realize everyone here coughs. The docks were lungs of empire, always inhaling smoke, always exhaling profit. Each breath cost someone something. A woman sells bread from a cart, her apron grey with soot. The loaves are small, dense, honest. A sailor buys one, pays with a coin blackened by touch. The transaction is brief, wordless, but sacred. In a world obsessed with expansion, this moment of exchange feels almost human. Empires don't run on conquest alone. They run on hunger met halfway. Beyond the warehouses, you spot a customs officer inspecting crates of opium bound for China. The smell is bitter, sharp, medicinal. History often hides its cruelty behind the word trade. You imagine the quiet horror packed inside those boxes, misery turned into currency. The sea swallows the guilt as easily as it swallows everything else. A ship horn moans across the water. It's a deep, mournful sound, half warning, half lullaby. You feel it vibrate through your chest. The empire was built on this tone, low, persistent, commanding. You can't ignore it, but you can't quite name it either. That's how power works. It sounds familiar even when it's wrong. Dockhands pause for a moment's rest. They sit on barrels, smoking pipes, faces lined like maps of endurance. Their boots are cracked, their eyes steady. These men built Britain more than any parliament ever did. Their reward is survival, sometimes warmth. Still, they smile between puffs of smoke. Humour was their rebellion, an empire within an empire. You step closer to the water. The tide rolls in, thick and brown, carrying scraps of rope and dreams from elsewhere. A seagull lands near your feet, its feathers streaked with soot. Even nature wears industry now. The British Empire didn't just shape the world, it stained it. And the stains never truly wash away. Farther down the dock, a group of children plays with discarded rope, pretending it's a snake. Their laughter cuts through the fog like sunlight trying its best. They don't see an empire, they see adventure. History hasn't taught them its weight yet. It will. It always does. The fog thickens again. You can barely see the outlines of the ships now. They fade slowly, becoming silhouettes, then ghosts, then nothing. You realize the empire's greatness was built on this illusion, the belief that disappearance equals distance, that out of sight means out of guilt. You turn away from the water. The echo of the horn lingers behind you, low and endless. Somewhere across the sea, colonies wake beneath the same sky, carrying the weight of someone else's dawn, and London, proud and blind, keeps breathing in the fog. The afternoon sky above London is a dull grey wash, the kind that erases edges. Inside a government office, however, the light is sharp, filtered through tall windows and the faint gleam of ambition. You stand before a vast map pinned to the wall. It stretches wider than logic, the oceans painted in soft blue, the continents blotted with pink, everywhere pink. It's the colour of ownership, the hue of pride disguised as geography. The map crackles slightly when touched, its paper dry from smoke and time. You trace a line from Cape Town to Calcutta, from Kingston to Quebec. Each route pulses faintly in your mind, as if alive. You can almost hear ships creaking, markets shouting, languages colliding beneath your fingertip. The British Empire had reduced the planet to paper, flat, obedient, and very pink. A comforting illusion. Two clerks whisper behind you, moving pins across Africa. Each pin represents a decision that will outlive them. Coffee for this region, rubber for that one. People somewhere will wake tomorrow to new taxes, new masters, new rules, drawn by ink that dries too fast. The room smells of parchment and confidence, that peculiar scent of men who mistake order for justice. On the table nearby, a teacup rattles as a carriage passes outside. The tremor leaves a tiny brown ring on the map's corner, just below India. Someone wipes it away quickly, embarrassed. You notice the irony. Empires worry more about stains on paper than stains on conscience. The teacup leaves a ghost mark anyway. Paper remembers what pride forgets. A young assistant approaches with a new dispatch from Burma, uprising, casualties, rain. He reads it softly as though apologizing. The older men nod gravely, then return to their pins. You realize bureaucracy has its own form of cruelty. Polite, efficient, endless. The British called it administration, history calls it distance. The fireplace hisses quietly in the corner, burning coal that smells faintly of salt and empire. Even warmth here is imported suffering. The flames reflect on the brass instruments, compasses, rulers, measuring sticks, tools of precision used to divide worlds without mercy. Every empire believes it can quantify chaos. None succeed. Outside, bells toll from Westminster. Their chime cuts through the haze like an oath. God save the Queen? someone mutters under his breath. You wonder if even God keeps the schedule these men impose. Faith, like trade, was exported in bulk. Salvation with shipping included. A draft sneaks through the window, rustling the edges of the map. For a moment, one corner lifts, revealing the bare wall beneath. It looks oddly empty, like honesty exposed. The clerk pins it back down, restoring order. Empires spend centuries perfecting that gesture, pressing paper against reality until it fits. The room quiets again. Pens scratch softly. The map glows under lamplight like a promise no one dares question. You feel both awe and unease. It's beautiful, in the way thunderstorms are. The red stretches everywhere, but you notice something subtle. The edges fade first. Always the edges. The smell of ink thickens as evening falls. Shadows pool in corners, like guilt gathering after ceremony. One by one, the men leave, closing doors softly behind them. The map remains humming with silence, lit by a single lamp. You stand there alone, watching the colors deepen in the dim. It looks eternal, but you know better. All pink fades to gray eventually. Even pride is biodegradable. And outside, the fog waits patiently to reclaim the world. The morning begins with a hiss, the sound of steam escaping an iron valve. You're in a railway yard now, where engines breathe like beasts just awakened. The air tastes of metal and oil, hot and sweet. Each locomotive gleams black and red, lined with brass so polished it reflects your face in ripples. The Empire's arteries are mechanical, pulsing with fire. Progress never smelled so industrial. Workers move with rhythm, shoveling coal, tightening bolts, shouting orders over the roar. Their faces shine with sweat and soot, indistinguishable by class in this furnace of motion. The British Empire loved efficiency. It found beauty in repetition. Steam was its religion, locomotives its priests. Each train carried not only cargo but certainty, the conviction that speed could solve morality. A whistle shrieks, slicing through the air. The platform trembles. You feel it in your chest, deep and thrilling. Somewhere, a boy waves as the train pulls away, eyes wide with hope. He doesn't know yet that every track laid outward also leads back home, bringing with it the consequences of reach. Steel, like empire, is a double-edged invention. You climb aboard a passenger car. Inside, the seats smell of leather and faint perfume. Gentlemen read newspapers, women fan themselves delicately. The carriage rocks smoothly, like breathing in sync with ambition. Tea is served in silver cups, steady even at high speed. Control has become aesthetic. Even motion must obey etiquette. Outside the window, factories blur past, smokestacks coughing into grey skies. Between them, you catch glimpses of fields and villages, half industrial, half memory. The countryside looks peaceful, but you can see the scars, canals, rails, wires. The empire didn't just conquer nations, it colonized its own landscape first. Progress always begins with self-inflicted wounds. The conductor passes through, his uniform crisp, his manner polite. Every system needs someone to keep the illusion tidy. Tickets punched, smiles exchanged, order restored. You realize that empires depend on rituals like these, small repetitions that make control feel natural. Nobody questions the schedule when the whistle sounds this confident. A distant station approaches, signposted with grand lettering. Victoria Junction. You feel a rush of heat as brakes scream and sparks fly. The sound is violent but practiced. Passengers barely look up. Habit dulls awe faster than time. The empire ran on predictability. Surprise was reserved for the conquered. You step off onto the platform. Steam curls around your legs, thick and ghost-like. The ground vibrates with departing engines. A brass band plays somewhere, off-key, cheerful, imperial. The music tries too hard. You sense that beneath the rhythm, exhaustion hums quietly. Greatness, when performed too often, becomes parody. Nearby, a porter wipes sweat from his brow, muttering about endless shifts. His accent isn't local. India, maybe, Jamaica. The empire built rails that connected the world, and then imported the world to maintain them. You nod at him, he nods back. Brief acknowledgement, silent solidarity. Empires forget their builders, but the builders never forget each other. The station roof stretches high above, a cathedral of glass and iron. Light filters through smoke in golden beams, illuminating dust that dances like memory. The British called this progress divine, the merging of heaven and machine. You stand beneath it, feeling both awe and unease. Beauty always hides its cost in design. As the next train departs, the whistle echoes long and low, blending with the city's heartbeat. The platform empties. The air cools. You're left with silence, soot, and the faint metallic taste of inevitability. You realize something then. The Empire's greatest invention wasn't steam, it was momentum. And momentum, once spent, is impossible to borrow again. The wind picks up, scattering ash across the tracks. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the Empire keeps running too fast to see where the rails end. The afternoon heat lies flat over Punjab, thick as a quilt. In Jallianwala Bagh, the dust tastes of brick and cumin, shawls rustle, babies fuss, men fan themselves with newspapers gone limp from sweat. A kite tilts across the milky sky. You hear vendors calling for lemon water, sharp, sweet, necessary. A walled garden isn't a battlefield, it's a place where shade collects and voices soften, even during a festival. Today, the air itself seems to hesitate. There is a tremor before the sound, boots on stone, a metal taste in the mouth. Soldiers enter like a arithmetic problem, straight lines, tidy faces, rifles held as if they're punctuation. Without warning, the garden becomes echo. Bullets strike walls that never learn to answer. People fall where they intended to listen. The scent turns metallic. Dust leaps, then settles, carrying the iron of blood. History, when it snaps, rarely explains itself first. It simply tightens. The facts are painfully simple. A crowd gathered, curfew, confused, protest intertwined with festival. Then Colonel Dyer blocked the exits and ordered sustained fire. No warning, no mercy, hundreds dead, many more broken, the walls still pocked with memory. The Empire insisted it was discipline. The garden knew it was a shudder that would keep echoing. A single afternoon taught millions how silence can be weaponized and how obedience can bruise deeper than a stick. Why did it matter? Because legitimacy evaporates faster in heat. Power can carry bayonets. It cannot carry breath. In one compressed hour, the Empire told India the contract was void. Safety would not be reciprocal. Law would not be mutual. Trust would not be honored. You can't drink tea respectfully with a hand that just clenched a trigger. Every empire survives on the illusion that it's necessary. Jallianwala Bagh made necessity taste like rust. You sense a second tremor, this time underfoot. Not panic, but resolve. The shock travels through families, markets, mosques, gurdwaras, schools. Children learn new words for dignity. Shopkeepers lower their voices and raise their standards. Priests fold grief into prayers that sound suspiciously like plans. It's strange how a garden can grow decisions instead of flowers. Soon you'll see how salt, cloth, and walking become tools sharper than steel. We'll return to that in a moment. In London, the air smells of rain and varnish. Committees convene, ink dries bravely. Words like regrettable and excess take turns at the podium. Paper imitates conscience with a tidy spine. Meanwhile, in kitchens across India, mothers retell the garden as a warning disguised as a lullaby. The empire underrates lullabies. They travel lightly, sleep under pillows, and wake entire generations. Humor survives, brittle but alive. So the sun never sets, someone says. Perhaps it's avoiding the paperwork. Dry, a little cruel, oddly kind. Jokes keep breath moving when morning would drown it. Even in tragedy, people reach for the small lever that lifts the day. Under empire, wit becomes a pocket-sized rebellion, quiet enough to pass inspection, durable enough to outlast a curfew. The walls remain, scars impressed into brick. You run your fingers over them and feel how stone remembers what people are asked to forget. The garden smells of dust again, less metallic now, more stubborn. Crows argue in the neem tree like unlicensed magistrates. The wind carries the soft chatter of a city deciding not to be afraid of its own throat. Fear has a calendar. Dignity has a longer one. Somewhere, a schoolteacher rewrites a lesson. The date stays, the tone changes. Facts remain acts, but history acquires breath. Children practice saying self-rule with the same careful lips used for prayers. A boy folds a torn newspaper into a kite and lets it rise into sunlight. It wobbles, corrects, then steadies, arguing with gravity in good faith. In Parliament, a man clears his throat and defends procedure. In a bazaar, a woman prices salt like it's a vow. In the middle, ordinary life knits itself back together with heavier thread. The empire believes time will dilute outrage. Time prefers to steep it. Tea again, always tea, growing darker the longer it's ignored. You leave the garden at dusk. The heat lifts. The air smells faintly of coriander and coal smoke. A child tugs your sleeve and asks if the walls are listening. You nod. Walls learn faster than governments. The path home crunches underfoot. Grit, seed pods, fragments of unbroken resolve. Many empires survive cruelty. Few survive clarity. The garden gave clarity, merciless, precise. After that, the world kept moving, but the contract did not. Dawn sits pale on the Sabarmati ashram, cool and clean, smelling faintly of damp earth and boiled lentils. You hear sandals before you see them, soft, honest, repetitive. Men and women fold cloth, tie bundles, check water gourds. Gandhi steps into the morning like a comma, small, quiet, decisive. The air holds that Sunday morning hush found in places that aren't sure if they're sacred or practical. Today, they will be both. They begin to walk. The road tastes dusty, the margins bright with marigolds and laundry hung like flags. Villagers line the path, faces open, voices low. No drums, no bayonets, just feet and breath. The British taxed salt, the cheapest necessity, the oldest right, the ocean's signature. It sounds trivial until dinner, then it becomes everything. If empire cannot share salt, what can it share? The facts run simple as a riverbed. A 240-mile march toward the Arabian Sea, a law dared at the shoreline, a pinch of wet crystals lifted like scripture. No sabres, just insistence. When Gandhi reached Dandi, he bent, scooped and smiled. The gesture smelled of brine and inevitability. The state replied with arrests. Of course, laws do not like being mocked by handshakes with the ocean. Why did it matter? Because it turned empire from map to kitchen. Salt is breath for stew, courage for labor, dignity for taste buds. Taxing it wasn't revenue, it was insult. The march stitched hundreds of villages into one long sentence. We refuse to starve politely. Bureaucracy can ignore speeches. It struggles with footsteps. 1,000 soft thuds rearrange the moral furniture of the century. Along the road, you taste dust and jaggery. Children run alongside, fireflies in daylight, shouting, "Namaste, Bapu," like it's a drumbeat that won't bruise. Reporters scribble in notebooks that smell of ink and sweat. A British officer watches from the shade, adjusting his hat whenever dignity itches. Unauthorized exercise, someone mutters. Paper hates metaphors. The body loves them. At night, the camp smells of smoke and starch. Lentils bubble. Cotton dries on lines. Coughs travel softly through canvas. Talks turn to jail, but the fear is oddly gentle, like weather, not fate. People tell stories of the last time they laughed with both lungs. A woman mends a shirt with the patience of legislation. Revolution is often a seamstress with good posture. In London, breakfast is calm, toast, marmalade, the respectable click of spoons. Headlines reach the table, carrying photographs of bare feet and stubborn smiles. The tea cools slightly. Quiet rooms are good at disguising panic as poise. Ridiculous, someone says. Childish, another adds. The sea keeps breathing anyway. A constable stops a group and confiscates salt with the dignity of a man rescuing a museum from a sneeze. The crowd smiles sadly, as if watching a dog carry a violin. You can feel the humor here, dry, precise, non-vengeful. It's hard to hate a man who looks that tired, doing something that silly. The point lands without shouting. Power has mistaken itself for theatre critic. Soon you'll see how arrests become advertisements. When leaders are taken, the road keeps walking without them. The march was never about feet. It was about permission withdrawn from absurdity. Salt law, sedition law, any law that puts a fence around common sense, each looks faint under noon sun. Bodies carry better arguments than pamphlets. At Dandi, the air tastes like knives made of water. Gandhi lifts that pinch, and the crowd murmurs like prayer discovering itself. You hear the surf repeating the lesson, necessary, necessary, necessary. Somewhere a camera clicks, somewhere else a conscience does. Empire prefers to be challenged in Latin. India challenged it in cuisine. By evening, packets of contraband crystals dry on roofs like small moons. Housewives commit felonies with ladles. Children smuggle spice against their tongues. The law looks larger on paper than in a kitchen. Kitchens win more centuries than courtrooms. You lie down near the shore, the salt air settling into your clothes. In the morning, the sea will still be generous. Laws can decline invitations only so long. The march made dignity ordinary, and ordinary is undefeated in the long run. The fan above you turns lazily, stirring the air but not cooling it. The smell of paper, sweat, and ink saturates the room. Wooden shutters creak as someone leans out to watch the monsoon gather over Bombay. The first drop hits the street with a sound like punctuation. Inside, the men and women of the Indian National Congress are writing their next demand, softly, calmly, as if ordering another round of tea. The room hums with restrained energy. You hear the rustle of saris, the cough of a clerk, the soft tick of a British clock that shouldn't be here. The table is crowded with maps, pens, and idealism. The empire might own the railways, the ports, and the weather reports, but not the ink in this room. You smell it? Sharp, inky, righteous. They are drafting independence one adjective at a time. A man reads aloud a clause demanding self-governance. His voice trembles slightly but grows steadier as it continues. The others nod, serious, silent. Outside, thunder answers like applause. The empire taught the colonies administration, procedure, paperwork. Now those lessons are being repurposed. Bureaucracy has turned poetic. Every movement borrows its enemy's pen before it borrows his gun. You notice the small things, the chipped cup, the fan's uneven rhythm, the mosquito-biting history on the ankle. These meetings aren't cinematic. They're slow, polite, occasionally tedious. And yet, that's the point. The British loved order. Now they'll lose to it. The revolution isn't chaos, it's paperwork with better handwriting. A secretary folds a petition and stamps it carefully with wax. The scent mixes with rain and ambition. Outside, the downpour begins, fat, heavy drops hammering roofs like drums. Everyone pauses to listen. The sound is comforting. For centuries, India heard orders, now it hears itself. Empires crumble quietly at first, like ceilings dripping before they cave. Meanwhile, in London, men adjust their monocles and sigh. They'll tire of this, one says. They always do. You can almost hear the clink of spoons against china, reassurance disguised as ceremony. The British Empire was brilliant at underestimation. It considered it politeness. The storm outside doesn't care about tone. The rain intensifies, papers warp, ink bleeds slightly, but no one stops writing. You watch a woman in the corner, her hands steady, her eyes fierce. She writes like she's building something you can't see yet. The candlelight flickers, the shadows stretch, the ceiling fans slow. When the power cuts, no one complains. Darkness is cheaper than permission. Soon, someone begins to hum quietly, an old Bhajan tune about persistence. The melody threads through the noise of rain and thunder, turning the room into a low, steady heartbeat. You realize revolutions don't always start with slogans. Sometimes they start with a hum that refuses to stop. You glance down at the document, still damp, still legible. Each signature glows faintly with oil from fingertips. Every letter a seed. The fatal mistake of empire was assuming these people wanted revenge. They wanted dignity, which is harder to suppress. Guns can silence mouths, they can't edit conviction. By nightfall, the rain lightens. The air smells of ozone and tea leaves. Someone opens the shutters. Wind rushes in, cooling the sweat on your neck. You hear laughter, soft and uncertain. The sound of people surprised by their own courage. Tomorrow, some will be jailed. Some will be mocked. But tonight, under this slow fan and this slower confidence, the empire just lost the luxury of inevitability. Outside, the gutters overflow with rainwater and something less visible, but much stronger. The year is 1939 and the air smells of iron and nerves. In London, sirens wail. In Calcutta, uniforms arrive. You watch newspapers slide across desks. Britain declares war on Germany. Another line follows quietly. India to contribute men and materials. No vote, no question, just assumption, habit disguised as law. You feel the irony instantly. The empire fighting for freedom while denying it at breakfast. The word liberty works overtime during wars. The recruiting stations open early. You hear bugles, see banners. Young men line up under Union Jacks that flutter with conviction. Some enlist for pay, some for pride, some because the village headman told them to. The recruiters smell of starch and cigarette smoke, the enlisted of dust and palm oil. Contracts are signed with hands that don't own the ink. Trains rattle out of Delhi and Nairobi carrying soldiers in wool, too thick for the tropics. The compartments reek of sweat and tin food. Letters home will smell the same. For millions of colonial troops. So the war begins as rumour and ends as confusion. They fight bravely, yes, but whose bravery is it, exactly? The empire's gratitude travels slowly. Postage, due. In London, ration lines grow longer. Housewives clutch coupons, counting sugar grains like prayers. The empire's wealth, once measured in oceans, now fits inside a teacup of scarcity. Even Churchill's speeches, grand and rumbling, can't hide the fatigue. "We shall never surrender," he declares. You notice he doesn't specify who "we" includes. Factories churn day and night, smoke staining the clouds a permanent bruise. The rhythm of the machines becomes the empire's new anthem, thunder without melody. Women take the places of men gone to war. Children grow up beside furnaces. The British home front learns what colonies already knew. Production feels heroic until it feels endless. Meanwhile, in Africa and Asia, soldiers march in borrowed boots. They sing in dozens of languages, their chants blending into something vast and wordless. The sound is hypnotic, hope mixed with resignation. The British officers call them lads. The lads call them sahib, mutual respect without mutual choice. You can almost hear history sigh between syllables. On a battlefield in Burma, the jungle hums with mosquitoes and artillery. The air tastes like metal rain. A young sepoy writes in his diary, "We fight men we've never met for men who've never seen us. The paper will survive longer than he does." Empires are good at collecting such lines. They make fine memorials later. Back in London, Churchill lights another cigar and draws red arrows across a map. India supplies soldiers, Malaya supplies rubber, Africa supplies patience. Every colony becomes a gear in the war's machine. But the machine burns through loyalty faster than coal. The British Empire, stretched thin, begins to wobble between pride and exhaustion. The victories come: Dunkirk, El Alamein, Normandy, and the streets fill with cheers. Yet beneath the celebration, something subtle shifts. The colonies have fought, bled, and died. They've seen weakness in their master's armor, human and undeniable. Respect has a half-life. Authority begins to expire. After the war, soldiers return home to ration cards and indifference. Promises of reform dissolve like sugar in lukewarm tea. London rebuilds its skyline, the colonies rebuild their confidence. Empires rarely notice when they lose ore before they lose land. You stand in Trafalgar Square on Victory Day. Flags wave, music plays, pigeons flutter. The air smells of champagne and sweat. You can hear laughter everywhere, but none of it sounds convinced. The war saved Britain's pride but spent its future. The empire won on paper. In spirit, it never recovered. The evening hums with static. You sit beside an old radio in a London flat, the kind with peeling wallpaper and the smell of boiled cabbage clinging to curtains. The air is thick with anticipation and cigarette smoke. Outside, the city hums under blackout curtains, pretending not to shiver. Then a voice fills the room, measured, confident, unmistakably British. For a moment, it feels like safety returning. Then the words arrive, and they taste like dust. It's 1947, and the broadcast announces something the British public had quietly suspected but never dared to imagine. India will soon be independent. The voice on the radio tries to sound noble, rehearsed, almost serene. But you can hear the fatigue in the pauses, the quiver between syllables. Empires don't end with fanfare, they end mid-sentence, corrected by a cough. The sound lingers, longer than applause, longer than denial. You lean closer, hearing phrases like transfer of power, mutual respect, the end of a great partnership. The language is polite, diplomatic, embalmed. No one mentions Jallianwala, or famine, or the salt in the air. Empires die as they lived, through careful euphemism. Outside, the rain begins again, pattering against the tin roof like hesitant applause. In the corner, an elderly woman folds her newspaper quietly. The headline tomorrow will say, "India free," she murmurs. "I never thought I'd see the day." There's no anger in her voice, just disbelief. The empire was a myth too large to fit inside human imagination. People learned to live inside it like weather. Now the climate is changing. Elsewhere, in Delhi, the radio crackles with the same voice, but it sounds different here. The accent that once commanded now falters. The static feels warmer, almost kind. Crowds gather around a single receiver, their faces lit by the dial's amber glow. You can smell sweat, incense, and wet earth. Freedom smells less like ceremony and more like rain on dry soil. The empire's fatal mistake was assuming the narrative belonged to it, that its broadcasts would always be believed, its frequencies unchallenged. But radios don't care who built them, they only care who listens. And tonight, the signal has travelled too far to return home unchanged. In London pubs, men raise pints to the end of an era. The tone is confused, half mourning, half relief. "At least we did it properly," someone says, as if paperwork could redeem plunder. The laughter feels thin, desperate. Even nostalgia requires confidence, and the empire no longer has enough left to spend. The BBC continues to play the national anthem between segments. You hear it echo through the thin walls of the flat, regal and remote. It sounds less like pride now and more like memory trying to stand up straight. The brass fades, the static returns. You exhale slowly, realizing that silence has become the new empire, vast, ungovernable, free. In India, dawn breaks over the red fort. The tricolour rises slowly, catching wind for the first time. People cheer, weep, pray, faint. Somewhere, a priest rings a bell until the metal bends. The sound crosses continents. London doesn't hear it clearly, but it feels the echo deep in its gut, where pride and loss share the same room. That night, the Prime Minister walks alone through Downing Street. The lamps cast long shadows. The rain soaks his coat. He pauses at the door, glances back once, and whispers something only the wind could hear. "So that's that?" You imagine the words dissolving in the drizzle. Finality rarely raises its voice. The radio crackles again, searching for a new station. You turn the dial slowly, hearing voices from elsewhere. African, Caribbean, Australian, soft, rising, certain. The empire may have lost a colony, but something larger is unraveling. The illusion of permanence. The idea that the center could hold forever. You switch off the radio. The silence hums louder than any broadcast. For the first time, London sounds like just another city in the rain. You wake to the smell of cane burning, sweet, acrid, familiar. It's not London now, but the Caribbean. humid and gold beneath a sun that forgives nothing. The air vibrates with insects and distant drums. Sugar plantations stretch toward the horizon, the fields glistening with dew and history. The British Empire once called this place the Jewel of the Indies. You can taste the irony in every grain of sweetness. Workers move through the fields, machetes flashing in rhythm. The stalks snap clean, releasing scent thick as syrup. Each cut is history repeating itself, measured, precise, exhausting. Generations carved wealth from these canes, their backs bent under the same indifferent sun. Britain grew fat on this sweetness, sipping tea perfumed by someone else's hunger. Nearby, an old man leans against a cart, wiping sweat with a rag. His shirt clings, his hands tremble, but his eyes are clear. "They left," he says softly, "but they didn't leave much." You nod. Independence came, but economics lingers like humidity, heavy, invisible, everywhere. Empires learn to retreat without apologizing. It's an art form. The scent of molasses drifts from a boiling house. It's intoxicating, rich, thick, almost luxurious. But when you step closer, it turns sickly. Sweetness, in bulk, becomes nauseating. You realize that's the empire's essence. Pleasure, industrialized past empathy. Once, sugar was currency. Now it's memory, melted down and repackaged for tourists who mistake heritage for healing. At the dock, rusted machinery creaks beside faded Union Jacks painted on barrels. Birds nest in the rafters. The past feels half erased but still sticky. You touch a wooden beam, smooth from years of loading and unloading cargo. The grain holds stories the ledgers forgot, the songs, the bruises, the small rebellions in rhythm. Paper remembers dates. Wood remembers hands. A woman sells sweet bread near the pier, her stall painted coral pink. The loaves smell of nutmeg and nostalgia. Grandma used to say, "Sugar makes people polite," she laughs, handing you a slice. You taste it, warm, soft, defiant. There's pride here, but also weariness. The sweetness hides something metallic underneath, faint but stubborn. At night, music spills from a tavern. Steel drums, guitars, laughter. The rhythm rolls like surf against the shore. You listen from outside, the air sticky, the stars slow. Colonial ghosts hate music like this. It refuses to stay obedient. It makes the past dance against its will. The empire tried to export structure. Rhythm brought it home. In London, confectioners still advertise pure cane sugar, the phrase printed in looping script. You notice the small hypocrisy. Purity is always someone else's labor. Supermarkets smell of packaging, not fields. The empire survived mostly as an ingredient list. Even nostalgia has marketing now. Back here, dawn paints the sky pale orange. The fields shimmer with dew that looks like tears pretending to sparkle. Workers stretch, yawn, begin again. The machetes glint in the light, rhythmic and resigned. Liberation tastes like sugar without sweetness, an acquired flavor, not a victory. You realize something soft but certain. The fatal mistake wasn't arrogance, it was distance. The British Empire believed it could separate consumption from consequence, geography from guilt, but the world, like sugar, dissolves eventually, mixing everything together again. You wipe your hands, they feel tacky, faintly sweet. The smell clings long after you leave. Empires are like that. Sticky where you least expect them, impossible to wash completely away. The year is 1943, the monsoon has failed, and the air smells of rot and rice husk. You walk along a narrow road outside Calcutta, where the wind carries both incense and decay. Vultures circle lazily above, their shadows long on the cracked earth. The sky feels too bright, too dry, too still. You hear coughing, not thunder. The empire still calls this land the jewel, though it now gleams with bones instead of gold. Trains pass in the distance, loud, indifferent. Each car carries grain, polished and safe, bound not for Bengal, but for the army. The sound of metal on track mocks the silence of empty stomachs. Bureaucracy hums efficiently. Hunger obeys no schedule. The empire insists this is shortage. The people call it betrayal. You taste the dust in your mouth. It sticks to your tongue. Sour, permanent. In the markets, the stalls are empty, but the prices rise anyway. A single handful of rice costs a week's wages. Mothers sell jewelry, then utensils, then fabric, then silence. Children chase the smell of food the way others chase kites. The British administration files reports about logistics difficulties. Hunger doesn't read reports, it writes them on faces. You step into a village, huts collapsed, fires long cold. The air hums faintly with flies. An old man sits by a well, eyes glassy, hands resting on his knees. We waited for rain, he murmurs, then for grain. Then for God. You nod, because no empire has invented a reply for that sentence. Empathy, like rice, runs out faster than pride. In London, dinner is served on silver. The smell of roast lamb, gravy, and wine fills the dining hall of Parliament. Someone clears their throat, quoting numbers with an air of detachment. Reports suggest distress in Bengal, possibly exaggerated. The clink of cutlery answers. You realize the empire's most enduring invention was distance, measured not in miles, but in appetite. The press prints photographs, gaunt bodies, hollow eyes. The government bans them, it's of course. Starvation doesn't suit the imperial palate. Meanwhile, trains keep running, grain keeps moving, statistics keep smiling. Empires hate interruptions. Death, when unprofitable, must be postponed to the margins. The margin here is wide enough to fit a nation. A British officer visits a relief camp. His uniform smells of starch and rain. He hands out biscuits to a group of children who chew slowly, politely, almost gratefully. The scene is photographed for the record. The biscuits are gone before the flash cools. Charity, he calls it. Closure, the file says. History prefers neat handwriting. Night falls, soft and cruel. The fields glimmer faintly under moonlight, their emptiness shining. Crickets hum, indifferent. Somewhere, a woman sings to a child who hasn't moved in hours. The song sounds like a prayer spoken underwater. You realize hunger is the quietest form of rebellion. It refuses to perform. It simply ends. Back in London, the newspapers speak of wartime pressures, transport strain, miscommunication. They don't mention Churchill's telegrams denying relief shipments. The empire survives on vocabulary, famine rebranded as inconvenience, death reframed as delay. Bureaucracy never runs out of ink. By dawn, the sky burns faint pink. Smoke from funeral pyres curls upward, joining the mist. You smell wood and ash and something ancient, the faint sweetness of surrender. The British Empire loved order, but order has no use for mourning. It files grief under local tragedy. The Empire's fatal mistake wasn't cruelty, it was detachment. When you stop hearing your subjects' hunger, your own pulse starts to fade. Empires die the way people starve, slowly, then all at once. London, 1953. The rain has scrubbed the city clean, and the streets smell of soap. brass and fresh paint. Flags ripple from every window, 1,000 identical smiles of fabric. Crowds press shoulder to shoulder along the mall, their umbrellas blooming like grey flowers. You hear cheers rolling down the street like thunder rehearsed to perfection. The air trembles with spectacle. The coronation has begun. Inside Westminster Abbey, gold gleams from every surface. Incense curls toward the vaulted ceiling, mingling with perfume and damp wool. The choir's voices echo like polished glass. You stand among them, half blinded by the glow. It's dazzling, too dazzling. Every empire disguises fragility with glitter. The more nervous the crown, the shinier the metal. The new queen walks slowly down the aisle, her train dragging like the tail of a comet. Cameras flash the first televised coronation in history. The empire has entered the age of broadcast. The whole world watches Britain watching itself. You realize this is both triumph and confession. Power that needs witnesses has already begun to waver. In living rooms from London to Lagos, people stare at flickering screens. The image is grainy, regal, slightly unreal. Some weep, some laugh, some remain silent. In India, the broadcast arrives hours later. Families gather around radio, hearing descriptions of velvet and vows. The empire's echo is still impressive, but thinner now, more distant. Majesty translated poorly over static. The ceremony continues. Trumpets, oaths, anointing oil. You smell candle wax and metal polish. The crown itself gleams with stones from half the globe. Rubies from Burma, diamonds from Africa, sapphires from Ceylon, all glittering under English light. Beauty and theft rarely share space so gracefully. You almost admire the craftsmanship. Almost. Outside, the crowd roars as the golden carriage appears. Horses stamp, drums roll, confetti rains down like sugar. It's breathtaking, choreographed, imperial. And yet, as you watch, something strange flickers through the spectacle, an undertone of nostalgia. The cheers sound like memory, pretending to be future. You realize the celebration isn't for power, it's for the idea that power once made sense. A boy waves a paper flag so hard it tears, he doesn't notice. His mother does. She folds it carefully, smoothing the wrinkles. Pride is always gentler in small hands. The cameras pan across their faces, ordinary, wet, radiant. This is how decline hides, behind sincerity. At the edge of the crowd, an old veteran watches quietly. His medals catch the light, then fade. "We built something," he murmurs. "Didn't we?" You nod, though you're not sure what remains of it. The empire, like his medals, shines only when polished. Rust comes for everything gilded. In a BBC control room, engineers adjust dials, sweat dripping onto glowing panels. "Perfect transmission," one says proudly. No one mentions how symbolic it feels, Britain broadcasting its glory into homes it no longer owns. Empire turned into entertainment. Dominion reduced to content. History rebranded as comfort. The parade ends, the streets empty. The rain begins again, soft and certain. Confetti dissolves into grey puddles. Flags cling to poles like tired hands. London looks almost peaceful, stripped of its ceremony. The empire's newest trick has worked. Transformation from ruler to relic, from authority to aesthetic. The camera cuts to black. The Queen waves one last time, her smile frozen mid-frame. You hear applause fade into static. The silence that follows feels rehearsed too. The British Empire has found immortality not in conquest, but in playback. And replay, no matter how grand, is still repetition of what's gone. The dock at Tilbury smells of diesel, rain, and salt. The year is 1948, and you hear the hum of the crowd, dock workers shouting, ship horns groaning, laughter echoing across the water. The SS Empire Windrush has arrived from Jamaica, its decks lined with faces bright and uncertain. The sea breeze carries the scent of coconut oil, tobacco, and cautious hope. London doesn't yet know it's receiving a mirror. The passengers step onto the pier, clutching suitcases patched with rope and stickers faded by salt. Some wear their Sunday best, wool suits in the wrong climate, shoes polished like declarations. The Empire had promised them home, and they have come to collect. They speak softly to each other, English rolling through Caribbean rhythms, music wrapped around politeness. London greets them with grey skies and guarded smiles. Immigration officers in uniform smell faintly of ink and wet wool. "You're from the colonies?" they ask, pretending not to sound surprised. Behind them, posters still boast "Empire needs you." You can almost hear irony chuckling quietly in the rain. The invitation had fine print invisible in sunlight. The newcomers board trains that smell of coal and damp newspapers. They press faces to the windows, watching green fields glide past. "Pretty," someone murmurs. Another replies, "Cold pretty." The carriages rattle with optimism, fragile but intact. They don't yet know that the Empire's welcome ends where convenience does. Britain likes help, it fears reflection. In London, lodging houses are cramped, walls stained by time. Rooms smell of paraffin heaters and fried plantain. The neighbours are polite but puzzled. "Where are you from?" they ask, as if distance were contagious. The Windrush generation answers patiently, endlessly, until patience becomes performance. Belonging, it turns out, is an ongoing audition. Jobs come quickly: buses, hospitals, post offices. The uniforms fit poorly but proudly. You hear laughter in break rooms, accents mingling with the clatter of teacups. Britain, exhausted from war, feels alive again, even if it won't admit who revived it. Empires forget that loyalty travels both ways. At night, the pubs fill with new music, ska rhythms slipping between brass and smoke. The locals tap their feet, pretending it's just novelty. You can smell rum and beer merging into something warm, almost forgiving. Britain's culture begins to change without permission, and that's precisely how culture works. The Empire is learning that influence doesn't retire, it relocates. Still, the kindness wears thin. "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," read the signs in lodging windows. The words sting sharper than cold. You see a man remove one of those signs quietly after being offered a song in thanks. Shame is slower than hate, but it moves. In Parliament, politicians argue about integration, a polite word for suspicion. They forget that empire had already integrated the world by force. Now it resists connection by choice. The fatal mistake wasn't losing colonies, it was failing to imagine equality as more than charity. Meanwhile, in small kitchens, families share rice and peas under low light. Children laugh in two accents. The walls hum with stories not yet written. They don't call it legacy, they call it living. The rain outside softens to mist. The Thames moves sluggishly, indifferent but familiar. Britain, for the first time, smells like everywhere at once. Tea, smoke, jerk, seasoning, rain. It's beautiful, complicated, irreversible. And you realize the empire didn't fall, it came home, asking what home even means. The year is 1956. The desert smells of dust, oil, and overconfidence. You stand near the Suez Canal, where the sun glares off the water like a mirror too bright to face. British soldiers in rolled sleeves sip tepid tea under canvas tents. The mission feels important, necessary, almost nostalgic, like reenacting greatness under harsher lighting. Nearby, Egyptian workers move silently, their expressions unreadable. Empires rarely sense irony before it arrives. The plan was simple on paper. Retake control of the canal from Egypt's new leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser. London, Paris and Tel Aviv aligned briefly, convinced history would behave. But history had other engagements. As the ships approached, the radio crackled with disbelief. Washington disapproved, Moscow threatened. The world, for once, told Britain no. The echo still stings. Back in London, the newspapers screamed glory before breakfast and embarrassment by supper. Crowds gathered around shop windows to read headlines that flipped between victory and fiasco. The air smelled of wet ink and confusion. The Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, coughed into a handkerchief and called it strategy. You can hear the sigh of empire breaking its own heart. In Parliament, the debates grew tense. We must defend our interests, one voice insisted. We must defend our dignity, replied another. The microphones picked up both desperation, disguised as duty. The public listened, bewildered. Once, Britain could act and the world adjusted. Now, the world was adjusting without asking permission. Across the Atlantic, Eisenhower scowled into a phone, his tone clipped and cold. Withdraw, he said. Now! The word landed like a verdict. It wasn't the first time the United States overruled an empire, but it was the first time Britain obeyed. The sound of compliance was quieter than surrender, but just as permanent. On the ground in Egypt, soldiers waited for orders that arrived too late. The air smelled of engine grease and stale sweat. The canal gleamed calmly, unmoved by speeches. When the retreat began, no trumpets played. Just the thud of boots, the scrape of crates, the shuffle of exhausted dignity being packed away. In London, Eden resigned, citing health reasons. History calls it humiliation. The empire, once too large for humility, had learned to flinch. The newspapers softened the language. A misunderstanding. An unfortunate episode. Even defeat sounded managerial. The British perfected the art of sounding composed while collapsing. You walk through Whitehall at dusk. The rain begins, gentle but insistent. Streetlights smear across the wet pavement, gold turning to grey. You pass a man in uniform staring at his reflection in a puddle. He salutes it absently, unsure which side of history he's on. The puddle doesn't salute back. Elsewhere, the world chuckles. Satirists draw cartoons of shrinking maps. French diplomats mutter about betrayal. Egyptian children chant songs of victory. The canal, unchanged, reflects every flag equally. It has no favorite empire, just tides. The Suez Crisis wasn't just a loss of influence, it was the loss of illusion. The British Empire had mistaken nostalgia for strategy, forgetting that the world had grown immune to its tone of voice. Pride, once currency, had gone off the gold standard. You stand on the shore, listening to the wind move across the desert. It sounds like laughter carried too far to be polite. For the first time, the empire hears itself from the outside and doesn't recognize the accent. It's the early 1960s. The air in Liverpool smells of salt, beer, and cigarettes. Dock cranes groan like old men waking up. Teenagers crowd into clubs lit by red bulbs. The air thick with sweat and bass. A new sound hums from cheap amplifiers, louder, freer, undeniably British, but not imperial. You hear it in your chest before your ears. 4 boys with guitars are rewriting what empire means, one chorus at a time. Across the Atlantic, American radios crackle. The announcers say Beatlemania like it's a diagnosis. But listen closely. Those harmonies carry something deeper. Wit, irony, self-mockery. The empire once exported coal and conquest. Now it exports sarcasm. It's less profitable, but far more contagious. History, like music, loves repetition. This time, it's voluntary. London's fog feels lighter now, almost whimsical. Carnaby Street smells of leather jackets and rebellion. The young laugh at ceremony, dance through class barriers, and shout, "All you need is love," like a polite insult to centuries of hierarchy. It's not treason, it's rhythm therapy. Even the Queen taps her foot. Probably. In Parliament, the older generation frowns. Decadence, they say. Noise. They forget that noise built everything they once admired. The factories are quieter now. The colony's gone. Someone has to make new sounds. The youth oblige, electric guitars replacing bugles, long hair replacing helmets. Progress, apparently, wears suede boots. You walk through Soho at midnight. Neon buzzes, puddles glow pink and blue. You smell fried onions, perfume, and ink. Writers in basements churn out satire for magazines that will be banned before breakfast. Laughter has become political currency. Empires lose territory, comedians gain it. That's how irony conquers without invading. Somewhere in Surrey, the Queen's Christmas speech plays on television. Her tone is steady, her vowels crisp. She speaks of a new Commonwealth, a shared future, mutual understanding. The phrasing is graceful, the subtext desperate. You can feel the shift. Authority now depends on being relatable. Majesty has entered the era of PR. The Beatles receive MBEs, members of the Order of the British Empire. John Lennon smirks. A few years later, he returns the medal, citing Britain's role in Vietnam and cold turkey slipping down the charts. The gesture is absurd, perfect, and oddly sincere. Once, defiance meant gunfire. Now it means postage. On London buses, immigrants from Jamaica and India ride beside students from Oxford. The accents collide, merge, evolve. English becomes plural. Even humour changes. Dry wit meets rhythm, sarcasm meets soul. The empire once demanded uniformity. Now diversity has become its most enduring export. At pubs, old veterans nurse pints in silence while jukeboxes play rock and roll. Some mutter, "It's not what it used to be." They're right, and that's the point. The empire's ghosts now haunt dance floors instead of battlefields. Better that way. Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists snap photos through drizzle. The guards still stand perfectly still, symbols of order in a world that stopped believing in it. A girl in a Union Jack dress walks past, singing. Her flag is fashion, not allegiance. Symbols survive by changing jobs. The empire's last soldiers carry guitars, cameras, and microphones. They conquer, not land, but loneliness. You realize this is Britain's softest reinvention yet, an empire of echo where every rebellion still sounds polite. And for once, the world loves it. It's London again, but quieter, slower. The buses are electric now. The smog replaced by drizzle so clean, it almost feels nostalgic. The Thames moves patiently beneath bridges that remember everything. You stand by the river at dusk, the air smelling faintly of rain, diesel, and roasted chestnuts. The skyline is a mix of glass and ghosts. Every skyscraper reflects a monument. Every monument pretends not to notice. You pass the British Museum, vast and polite. Inside, the air is cool and reverent, smelling of stone dust and old money. Crowds drift between mummies, statues, and stolen gods. Each label reads "on loan," a phrase so charming it could almost fool eternity. The empire may have dissolved, but its storage habits remain impeccable. You realize power never really leaves, it just relocates to display cases. Nearby, schoolchildren take selfies beside the Rosetta Stone. They giggle, flash peace signs, and hurry off for lunch. None of them built the empire. All of them live inside its leftovers. You feel the strange tenderness of inheritance without choice, an unearned pride, a borrowed burden. History has impeccable handwriting and terrible handwriting teachers. Outside, a busker plays "Rule, Britannia" on a saxophone. It sounds playful, almost ironic. Coins clink into his case. He nods in thanks. The tune once made Navy's March. Now it makes tourists smile. You wonder if the melody knows it's retired. In government offices, debates echo about immigration, trade, and British identity. The words are the same, the tone softer, the certainty gone. Take back control, someone says decades later, forgetting they never really had it. The empire's ghost whispers through policy papers. We were special once. Ghosts rarely admit therapy might help. You walk through a market in East London. The smell of curry, jerk chicken, and fish and chips blend into one fragrant contradiction. Voices rise in Hindi, patois, Polish, and Cockney. You realize this city is the empire's most beautiful accident. Conquest turned conversation. Subjugation became supper. At night, the pubs fill again. The laughter sounds different, mixed, layered, joyful, in a complicated way. Britain didn't lose its empire, it misplaced it into everyone's accent. The empire became a memory with rhythm. A poster on a wall reads, "Keep calm and carry on." It was once wartime propaganda, now it's printed on mugs and pillows. Britain has turned anxiety into merchandise. That's a kind of genius. The empire's stiff upper lip evolved into irony, its last true export. You pause on Westminster Bridge. Big Ben glows golden through mist, its chimes rolling over the city like breathing. The sound feels less like power now, more like continuity. Empires end, habits linger. Tea still tastes like empire distilled into comfort, bitterness masked by warmth. The museum closes, the lights dim. Somewhere, a curator locks a glass case containing a crown, a sword, and an apology that never got written. Dust settles politely. The empire is tidy, even in absence. And as you walk away, the wind through the alley carries the faint scent of the world it once ruled. It smells of spice, smoke, and unfinished conversations. You sit by a window as rain brushes against the glass, gentle and steady. The steam from your teacup curls upward, carrying hints of bergamot and memory. The spoon clinks once, softly, before resting. Across the room, the clock ticks with dignified slowness. Britain, it seems, has always preferred ceremony to silence. Even endings are served with saucers. You take a sip. The taste is comforting, bitter, faintly colonial. Empires die loudly, but they're remembered in flavor. Outside, the streetlights hum over puddles that mirror red buses gliding by. The city moves as if on tiptoe, polite in its melancholy. It has learned that progress doesn't need trumpets. Sometimes it just needs punctuality. You realize that empire has become routine, an inherited habit like queuing or apologizing for the weather. Power now hides in manners. The tea cools, but the scent deepens. You remember how it travelled here, from India, from Ceylon, from ships that smelled of salt and debt. For centuries, people drank empire 3 times a day without noticing. History doesn't always weigh heavy. Sometimes it dissolves in hot water. You stare at the surface, watching the ripples settle like thoughts that almost mattered. Somewhere nearby, a radio murmurs softly, a cricket match, a weather report, a voice explaining the trains. It sounds peaceful, bureaucratic, eternal. Yet beneath that calm is exhaustion. Every empire eventually trades noise for narration. Britain mastered both. It now speaks in documentaries and disclaimers, its once commanding tone turned into bedtime cadence. You glance outside again. The city glows like wet parchment. Office lights shimmer in towers that replaced palaces. The empire used to rule the map. Now it manages schedules. It's not defeat, it's evolution into paperwork. You can almost admire the efficiency. You sip again. The flavor sharpens. Tea was once an act of dominance, then of comfort, now of survival. The leaves carry their own diplomacy. Bitter first, forgiving later. It's the closest Britain has come to confession. Every empire needs one drink that admits without apologizing. The rain thickens, steady and patient. On the windowsill, condensation gathers like tiny parliaments, debating gravity, avoiding decisions. You smile at the thought? Empires never really vanish. They delegate to humidity. You feel warmth rising from the cup and think of how history keeps reheating itself, refusing to go cold. In the cafe below, someone laughs. Another voice responds with a soft cheers. The sound is small, human, honest. That's what's left when grandeur evaporates. Conversation, tea, and mild sarcasm. You find it strangely perfect. Somewhere in Delhi, someone else stirs their cup too. Different accent, same ritual. The empire remains only as shared routine, not hierarchy, but rhythm. That might be the most peaceful ending history's ever managed. You finish your tea. The cup is empty, but still warm. The storm outside eases to drizzle. The empire, too, has learned to drizzle. Persistent, grey, unthreatening, almost soothing. You leave a small tip beside the saucer, a gesture of gratitude or irony, perhaps both. The line between them has always been British, and as you stand, the bell above the cafe door rings once, a sound soft as history, finally exhaling. It's night again, and the rain returns. It falls not as punishment, but as punctuation, soft, persistent, perfectly enunciated. The cobblestones glisten beneath the lamplight, and every drop sounds like an apology rehearsed too well. You walk slowly, the air cool and damp, the smell of wet stone clinging to your coat. London feels empty, but not alone. It's haunted, but its ghosts are punctual. You pass St. Paul's Cathedral. The dome glows faintly in the mist, its grandeur softened by drizzle. Beneath it, tourists huddle with umbrellas, whispering about architecture and redemption. The empire built monuments for memory, and then forgot what they were for. You pause beneath the archway, feeling the weight of the city's collective sigh. Somewhere nearby, a bus splashes through a puddle, and for a moment, you imagine it's a ship, the kind that once carried tea, silk, and borrowed futures. Empires begin with oceans and end with commutes. The sound fades quickly, leaving only rain. In an alley near Fleet Street, an old printing press sits in a window, silent. Its brass letters gleam faintly under lamplight. This machine once forged opinion, declared wars, justified hunger. Now it collects dust, dignified, retired. You think about how history never stops talking. It just changes its voice from trumpet to typewriter to touchscreen. A newspaper floats along the gutter, headlines blurred, ink bleeding into water. The words global markets dissolve into grey streaks. Even paper forgets the hand that wrote it. You bend down to lift it, then let it go. The rain is better at reading than anyone alive. You reach the Thames, dark and reflective. The water smells faintly of silt and iron. Bridges stretch across like veins, carrying cars, ideas, fatigue. Empires, too, are bridges, built to connect and control until they rust into metaphors. You lean against the railing and listen to the city breathing through rain. A voice behind you hums softly, an old tune, maybe God Save the Queen, maybe something else entirely. It's hard to tell when pride becomes nostalgia. You turn, but no one's there. Just the echo of something that refuses to be forgotten. Lightning flickers far away, a polite kind of lightning, bright but disciplined. Even nature here seems trained to behave. You laugh quietly at that. Empires don't fall in storms, they fall in drizzle. Slow, elegant, irrevocable. You close your eyes and breathe in the rain. It tastes faintly of history, metal, salt, paper. You wonder how many centuries have exhaled through this same weather. Every drop feels recycled, carrying a whisper from somewhere else. Jamaica, India, Egypt, Hong Kong. Rain is the empire's last correspondence. When you open your eyes, the streets shimmer, empty. The city feels timeless again, which is another way of saying tired. You know this calm won't last, but you don't need it to. History doesn't promise closure, it promises continuity. You walk home slowly, coat heavy with rain, pockets full of ghosts that weigh nothing at all. And behind you the bells begin to ring, not for victory, just for time. You open an atlas in a quiet library. The pages smell of dust, ink, and forgotten pride. The air hums faintly with the weight of paper, a kind of silence only old knowledge makes. The lines on the map are thin, faded, but still assertive. Red ink spreads across continents, tracing ambition that once seemed eternal. You run your fingers along the edges, feeling where certainty used to live. Maps, like empires, are confident liars. The librarian coughs softly behind you. The sound echoes against marble and oak. Every shelf here hums with ghosts disguised as geography. You notice how the older maps bleed color, how red turns to pink, pink to beige, beige to humility. History fades with impeccable manners. You can almost hear the cartographers apologizing as they erase their own confidence. You flip to Africa. Borders drawn with rulers, names spelled in foreign tongues, rivers mispronounced for centuries. The empire once believed order could be drawn straight. Now those same lines blur, curling like smoke. You realize maps don't record ownership, they record audacity. Every neat shape once hid chaos under ink. You turn the page again, India, Canada, Australia. The names look familiar but distant, like old acquaintances who changed numbers. You notice that time erases certainty faster than revolution ever could. The British Empire dissolved not because of rebellion, but because reality stopped fitting inside rectangles. A group of school children enters the library, whispering and giggling. Their teacher points to the atlas, explaining colonies and trade. The children's faces are curious but unimpressed. For them, empire is trivia, not trauma. You find that comforting? The best revenge against domination is disinterest. Outside, buses pass with advertisements for travel. Visit the Commonwealth. see the world. The irony tastes almost sweet. Once, the empire brought the world here. Now it begs to visit what it once owned. Progress, it seems, books its own ticket. You think about explorers Cook, Raleigh, Drake. Their portraits still hang in museums, eyes wide with certainty. You wonder if they'd recognize the world now, where oceans connect rather than divide. Perhaps they'd feel proud, or perhaps small. Either way, history has excellent comedic timing. The light from the window fades into gold. Dust dances above the atlas, turning maps into moving constellations. You close the book slowly, feeling the quiet between your fingers. You realize something simple. The world didn't shrink when the empire fell. It expanded beyond control. In a corner, a globe spins idly on its stand. It's beautiful, smooth, innocent. It doesn't know it was once propaganda. The red patches are gone now, replaced by soft neutrals. The empire has finally joined the weather, occasionally discussed, rarely trusted. You exhale, the sound barely disturbing the air. The librarian looks up, smiles faintly, then returns to her work. The past, it seems, files itself. You leave the room quietly, as if exiting someone else's memory. The door closes behind you with a sigh. The sound feels final, but not sad. Empires end. Knowledge remains. Maps forgive everyone eventually. And history, mercifully, stops insisting on being read. A row of uniforms hangs in a museum, pressed and perfect under soft white light. The air smells faintly of fabric, brass polish, and stillness. You move closer. The jackets gleam with medals, buttons shining like small suns. There's pride here, but also fatigue. Cloth remembers sweat long after washing. You imagine the soldiers who once wore them, young, certain, rehearsed in obedience. Now their armor protects nothing but memory. A guide whispers facts to a group of visitors. Colonial regiments, she says, drawn from across the empire. Her voice carries the same reverence reserved for symphonies. You wonder if reverence and denial share the same tone. The visitors nod, eyes wide, polite. History, you think, is best consumed standing still. One uniform bears a name tag, Singh. Another reads Adewale. Another, McAllister. Different continents, same tailor. You realize the empire's greatest illusion was sameness, the idea that fabric could erase difference, yet under every stitch hides sweat from another climate. No empire lasts longer than the uniforms that served it. The brass buttons reflect your face, distorting it slightly. You look both present and ancient, complicit and curious. That's the trick of museums. They turn witnesses into accomplices. You can almost hear the uniforms whispering among themselves. They still come to look, don't they? In the next display, helmets line a shelf, pith, steel, and gilt, all arranged alphabetically. The signs read, preserved for educational purposes. You think preservation is just nostalgia with better lighting. Each dent tells a story, but none are labeled doubt. Doubt, after all, isn't collectible. You move to the far end of the hall. There's a photograph of soldiers smiling beside a cannon. Behind them, a banner reads for king and country. Their smiles are confident, uncracked. You wonder what they thought country meant that day. Perhaps they imagined home as a promise, not an address. Empires sell promises like postcards. In the next case lies a tattered flag. Union Jack faded to grey-blue. The label says, recovered from Rangoon, 1942. You trace the air just above the glass, not touching it. The fibers ripple faintly under air conditioning, like breath pretending not to be. You whisper, "Thank you," though you're not sure to whom. A custodian dusts nearby, humming under her breath. The tune is soft, familiar. You recognize it, a lullaby from somewhere far away. She polishes medals that never belonged to her country. The empire still expects gratitude for its own reflection. She hums louder. The brass shines brighter. You step back and take in the entire room. Uniforms, flags, portraits, silence. The air feels heavier now, thick with invisible rehearsals. Every empire eventually becomes a wardrobe. You realize this is what victory looks like after translation. Clothing no one needs, displayed for those who can't remember why. The museum lights dim slightly for closing time. The uniforms gleam one last time before fading into shadow. The brass winks once, like a secret shared. You exit into cool night air. The wind feels freer than anything behind glass. You breathe deeply. The world outside smells of rain, diesel, and something wonderfully unclaimed. Empires collect everything except forgiveness. But forgiveness is already in the air. Quiet, diffuse, impossible to catalogue. The door closes behind you with a soft thud. The gallery smells of waxed floors, parchment, and the faint tang of old metal. Sunlight seeps through tall windows, breaking into pale gold ribbons across marble. You walk slowly, each step echoing like a polite apology. In this place, time behaves. The plaques whisper facts in perfect grammar, while the air holds its breath. History here is not loud, it's curated. Glass cases line the walls. Inside, relics shimmer faintly. Coins from vanished colonies, silver compasses, diaries with elegant handwriting. One case holds a tea set from Calcutta, the porcelain thin as pride. The label reads, "Trade Gift, 1784. You wonder which part was the gift, the porcelain or the labor that made it. Empires were excellent at wrapping contradictions in ribbon. You pause at a painting of a harbor, ships anchored under a burning orange sky. The brush strokes glow with confidence, each wave carefully domesticated. The artist signed his name in bold cursive. No mention of who built the ships, who rowed, who drowned. Art remembers differently than people. It edits guilt into composition. Nearby, a guide leads a small group. Her voice floats through the room, reverent and steady. "This gallery," she says, "represents the height of Britain's global influence." You look around. The silence disagrees. Influence doesn't glow. It lingers, patient as dust. The air smells faintly of linen and irony. A child presses her face against the glass, eyes wide at a jeweled sword. "Who did we fight?" she asks. The guide hesitates, searching for a word gentler than everyone. You admire her restraint. Truth is rarely museum safe. You move deeper into the gallery. The light softens. A display shows photographs from the early 20th century. Governors, clerks, parades, processions. Everyone looks slightly overexposed, like ghosts rehearsing authority. Behind them, palm trees blur into background noise. The empire preferred its scenery obedient. A single bench sits before a large painting of the globe, red sections glowing faintly beneath the varnish. You sit. The wood creaks, a familiar sound, like history adjusting its posture. You study the continents. The red seems to pulse slightly, alive despite itself. Paintings remember ambition longer than people do. A janitor sweeps quietly nearby. His broom makes a soothing rhythm. Swish, pause, swish. You realize it's the most honest sound here. The empire survives best in maintenance, the quiet repetition of tidying up what should have been left alone. A small sign near the exit reads, "No flash, photography." You smile. Light, it seems, is still controlled. Even illumination needs permission. Empires never entirely lose their manners. They just find subtler ways to say no. You stop before leaving and glance back. Dust floats through a beam of sunlight, each particle catching light for a moment before disappearing. It looks almost holy. You realize that this is how history endures, not in victory, but in suspension. You exhale. The echo of your breath fades into marble. You leave the museum quietly, blinking against the daylight. The street outside smells of rain and exhaust. The world, for all its noise, feels freer than anything behind glass. The evening arrives softly. The sky turns a slow, reflective grey, and the city begins to hum its bedtime rhythm. You stand on a hill overlooking London. The wind carries the faint smell of smoke, grass, and fried food. Lights bloom in the distance, yellow, white, electric blue. The skyline glitters like history, pretending to stay awake. You feel small but comfortable, like a page in a very long book that knows it's almost finished. The Thames snakes below, silver under moonlight. Bridges glow faintly, their arches steady and kind. Cars move like quiet ideas, not battles. You think about how this same river once carried ships of empire, war, trade, ambition. Now it carries reflections and seagulls. The water never cared who owned it. You close your eyes and listen. The sound is eternal. The low hum of the city, footsteps, laughter, distant bells. It's the same song history always hums when no one's listening. Civilizations fall, but cities keep gossiping. London, at least, never learned how to stop. You open your eyes again. The air feels heavy with nostalgia, but not sorrow. The empire's ghost still lingers, but it's tired now, content to haunt through cuisine and documentaries. Once, power meant command. Now it means commentary. Britain narrates its own decline with excellent diction. Somewhere, a clock tower strikes 10. The bells echo across rooftops. The sound doesn't demand anything anymore. It just announces, empires crave eternity, nations learn punctuality. You smile, that's an improvement. Eternity always came with bills. A fox darts across the path, silent as thought. Its fur glows copper under the streetlight. For a moment, it looks like something out of an illuminated manuscript, wildness outlined in grace. You realize nature's indifference is the purest kind of mercy. Empires collapse. Foxes adapt. Evolution has no allegiance. Nearby, a couple sits on a bench, sharing chips from a paper cone. The smell of vinegar drifts toward you, sharp and familiar. Once, vinegar flavored conquest. Now, it flavors comfort. The taste of empire has mellowed into domestic ritual. There's beauty in that. A billboard nearby advertises a museum exhibition, The British Empire, a Complex Legacy. You chuckle softly. Complexity, after all, is the empire's final defense. When victory fades, vocabulary takes its place. The past survives best when politely explained. You breathe in the night air, cool, metallic, faintly sweet. It tastes like rain and reinvention. Somewhere far away, waves crash against another shore that once saluted this flag. The sea, as always, ignores borders. Its loyalty belongs to the moon. You realize the Empire's greatest transformation was this: from command to curiosity, from empire to accent, from anthem to echo. It's almost tender now, softened by irony, sweetened by memory. Power aged gracefully into nostalgia. The wind shifts, cool against your face. You pull your coat tighter and start walking downhill. The lights of the city shimmer ahead, infinite and ordinary, and somewhere behind the glow you feel history following, no longer chasing, just keeping you company. It's late now, the streets have emptied, leaving only the faint hum of tires on wet asphalt. You walk through London half asleep, the air damp and kind. Neon reflects on puddles, turning rain into language, soft, unpunctuated, endlessly repeating. The city doesn't whisper anymore, it murmurs. You realize that Britain's last empire isn't land, or law, or trade, it's language. The world still dreams in English, even when it doesn't mean to. You pass a bookstore with its lights still on. Inside, shelves bow beneath the weight of paper and memory. You can almost smell ink through the glass. Warm, heavy, familiar. Shakespeare, Dickens, Orwell, Austen. Their names glow faintly on spines. Empires crumble, but adjectives survive. You watch the letters shimmer like constellations, bright, arranged, infinite. Language is the only crown that never tarnishes, because it keeps changing heads. You walk further, a bus passes, its digital sign reading Waterloo, 24-hour service. The irony makes you smile. Britain lost battles, gained timetables. That's progress in its most British form. Victory rebranded as punctuality. You hear the low hum of the engine fade into drizzle, a rhythm that sounds almost like a lullaby. Across the street, a cafe worker wipes down a table, humming softly. The tune is American, the accent Caribbean, the lyrics universal. This, you think, is empire's true afterlife, chorus over conquest. Where once borders were enforced, now melodies drift freely. Colonies became playlists. It's strangely beautiful, even if unintentional. The rain thickens. Streetlights paint halos on the pavement. You step around a puddle shaped roughly like India, then another like Africa. They ripple as drops strike, geography rearranging itself every second. You realize no cartographer could keep up with water. Maybe that's the lesson history needed all along. At the corner, a man sells umbrellas with quiet efficiency. 2 for 5, he says, smiling. His accent bends vowels differently, yet perfectly. You buy one, not because you need it, but because exchange feels human. Commerce without conquest, trade without flag. The smallness of it feels sacred. You pause near a bridge. Below, the river glimmers with city light, its surface fractured but faithful. Boats drift silently under the arches. The water carries reflections instead of cargo now. You watch your own face tremble on its surface and wonder if the empire ever recognized its own reflection. Probably not. Power rarely looks down. A passing gust chills your hands. You tuck them into your coat and breathe slowly. The air smells of rain and diesel and resignation. But beneath it all, there's peace. The peace of something that's finally stopped insisting on itself. The empire's last colony, you realize, was its own ego. The sound of distant bells drifts across the water. It's not triumph, it's maintenance. The city rings to remind itself it's still here. You smile, knowing that's enough. Continuity is underrated. You keep walking. English follows you like a polite shadow, curious, adaptable, apologetic. It's still expanding, still shifting, still colonizing meaning itself. But now it feels less like dominance and more like weather, inevitable, impartial, occasionally poetic. You whisper something to the night, nothing important, just sound. The city listens, translates, forgives. The air tonight feels older than the century. You sit on a bench overlooking the river, wrapped in a coat that smells faintly of wool and rain. The street lamps stretch long reflections across the Thames, like threads of memory woven into water. The city hums gently behind you, its heartbeat steady but slower now. Everything feels softer, as if the empire itself has fallen asleep and you've stayed to keep watch. A fog rolls in, thick, deliberate, tender. It muffles footsteps, sirens, even time. This is London's favourite disguise. You can barely see the opposite shore, just faint silhouettes of cranes and domes. The fog makes equals of everything, rich and poor, king and clerk, monument and puddle. Empires would have hated this much fairness. You listen to the slow rhythm of rain on the bench, like fingertips tracing old stories. The air tastes faintly metallic, the way old coins do when handled too long. You think about currency, how it once bore the Queen's face across continents, commanding trust from strangers. Now, money circulates silently through screens, authority digitized, even reverence learned to tap next. Across the river, a bell tolls midnight. The sound stretches through fog, soft but firm. You feel it in your chest like a heartbeat you don't own. The empire's gone, but its rhythm remains, steady, formal, politely haunting. You imagine it apologizing for staying too long. A figure walks past, coat collar up, umbrella low, footsteps careful. For a second, the shape could be anyone, Churchill, a clerk, a ghost. London doesn't separate them anymore. The fog equalizes ambition. You exhale, watching your breath vanish. Power always envied vapor. It leaves no evidence. You close your eyes. Behind your eyelids, the empire returns, not as flag or anthem, but as collage. Tea steaming in a porcelain cup, train whistles echoing through rain, letters sealed with wax and gilt, none of it sharp, all of it soft. Nostalgia, the empire's final export. You open your eyes again. The fog has thinned slightly. Buildings emerge like shy confessions, St. Paul's, Big Ben, bridges stitched across the dark. You realize beauty was the empire's alibi. It conquered through admiration as much as force. People still visit its ruins for the view. A street cleaner passes, his brush scraping gently over wet cobblestone. He hums a tune you can't place. The melody wavers, uncertain but warm. It sounds like something between prayer and patience. Perhaps that's what survival sounds like. You look at the clock tower again. The hands glow faintly against the mist, still punctual, still certain. Empires collapse, time doesn't care. That, somehow, is comforting. The rain begins again, steady and familiar. Drops slide down your sleeve like tiny signatures. You think of how history always ends the same way, not in silence, but in weather. The sky signs the paperwork, you rise from the bench. The fog folds behind you, seamless, forgiving. The city exhales, releasing you from its spell. And as you walk away, the last empire fades, not defeated, not triumphant, just finally tired enough to rest. The rain has stopped. The sky, pale and washed, stretches over London like parchment newly erased. The first light of dawn slips between rooftops, soft and uncertain, painting everything in muted silver. You stand by the river one last time, breathing in air that smells of stone, tea, and something unburdened. The world feels freshly ironed. The empire has finally folded itself into history's drawer, neatly labelled, rarely opened. You watch a gull glide low across the water. Its wings catch the rising light, white and quiet. The Thames murmurs beneath it, old and forgiving. Every empire ends. But rivers don't keep grudges. They carry what they're given, salt, silt, stories, and move on. That's all survival really is. Movement without bitterness. The bells of Westminster chime, distant and tender. They don't announce conquest now, or only time. Empires wanted eternity, clocks are wiser. They settle for rhythm. You find comfort in that, the small honesty of routine. The city wakes slowly, stretching through fog, remembering its humanity. Behind you, a cafe opens early. The smell of toast and coffee drifts into the cold air. Someone laughs, someone drops a plate. Ordinary sounds, wonderfully alive. You realize this is the true inheritance, not red borders on a map, but mornings like this, where existence is enough. The empire ruled half the world. Now, a barista rules the espresso machine. Balance restored. You take a seat on the same bench from the night before. The wood is damp, but you don't mind. Across the river, sunlight slips through scaffolding on old buildings, gilding cracks like repairs in porcelain. Time has done what politics couldn't. It's made peace with imperfection. You breathe deeply, and the air feels generous again. Somewhere, a school bell rings. Children will learn history today, some version of it, tidy and digestible. You smile softly, knowing the truth will seep through anyway. The truth always finds a way, even when politely redacted. It lives in accents, recipes, and jokes. It hides in the rhythm of rain. You close your eyes. The city hums beneath you, steady as breath. The empire's ghost has grown polite. It no longer demands attention. It simply lingers like perfume after a guest leaves. Familiar, faint, harmless. That's what healing sounds like. Absence, behaving kindly. The wind shifts, carrying a new scent, fresh bread, damp leaves, something green. Spring, maybe. Renewal without ceremony. The world keeps turning, indifferent to monuments. That's its mercy. Empires write in marble, time edits in moss. You think of all the voices that built this story: sailors, servants, poets, rebels, kings, ghosts. They've all gone quiet now, folded into sleep. What remains is the gentle hum of continuity. Streets filled with new footsteps, new languages, new songs. Every ending is a beginning rewritten in a softer key. The light brightens, the fog lifts, the city exhales. Somewhere, tea is poured, clocks reset, pages turned. Nothing left to conquer, nothing left to defend, only the delicate task of continuing. You feel the peace of insignificance, the freedom of no longer being important. You rise, hands in pockets, and start walking. The water glints behind you, steady as breath. The empire doesn't follow, it rests now, finally tired enough to dream. And as you disappear into the quiet morning, you hear the world whisper its closing line. Not a warning, not a eulogy, just a sigh of relief. At last, we can begin again.